Have you ever wondered, why them? Why do some people seem to fall for you instantly, before you've said much of anything? Why does the air between you feel electric, as if you're speaking in a language older than words? It's tempting to chalk it up to charm, timing, or chemistry. But what if something deeper, far deeper, was shaping those intense connections? What if love wasn't so much about the other person, but about us seeing ourselves through them? According to the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, the people who fall in love with you, deeply, obsessively, irrationally, aren't just falling for your looks or your laugh. They're falling for something they've lost, or worse, something they never even knew they had. We like to think love is a choice, that we meet someone, get to know them, and slowly, logically fall for who they are. But the truth is far more haunting and far more beautiful. Jung believed love isn't rational, it's symbolic. We fall in love not with people, but with what they represent. They act as mirrors reflecting back the parts of ourselves that we've repressed, rejected, or forgotten. Let's say you're calm, stoic, quiet. People might say you're the rock in a storm, but maybe, just maybe, you've buried a more expressive, wild, passionate part of yourself, a part you deemed unsafe, unwelcome, wrong. Then one day someone appears, someone who lives that repressed energy. They laugh too loud, they cry openly, they wear their soul on their sleeve, and you feel pulled to them, magnetically. You're not just attracted, you're recovering a missing piece of yourself. This is the first reason people fall in love with you. You awaken what they've lost. You become the embodiment of a trait they long ago pushed into the shadows, and by loving you they hope, consciously or not, to reconnect with it. Jung called this phenomenon projection. We don't fall in love with the person, we fall in love with the image of them we've created, an image built from fragments of our unconscious, childhood wounds, unmet needs, abandoned dreams. Projection happens when we hand someone a script and expect them to play a role we wrote long ago. That role might be the savior, the muse, the wild one, or the gentle parent we never had. And here's the catch. They don't even know they're auditioning. You might be surprised to learn how often someone falls for you because you activate their internal drama, their private mythology. To you, you're just being yourself. To them, you're a character in a sacred story they've been trying to complete their whole life. That's why they feel like they just know you, why they say you're different, why they think you're the one. But often, they aren't seeing you, they're seeing a reflection, a psychic stand-in for something they desperately crave or miss. Jung took this even further with two powerful archetypes, the anima and the animus. He believed that every man carries an inner image of the feminine, the anima, and every woman carries an inner image of the masculine, the animus. These aren't just preferences, they're psychic blueprints, shaped by early experiences and collective myth. Imagine a woman raised in a cold, emotionally distant household. Her animus, the masculine image within her, might be warm, protective, and emotionally present. She may grow up yearning for that presence, not realizing she's not just searching for a partner, she's searching for him. Then one day, you walk into her life, you smile, you listen, you offer quiet strength, and just like that, you become him, the archetype she's carried inside since childhood. This is the second reason people fall in love with you. You reflect their inner ideal, not necessarily their ideal partner, but their ideal self, the energy they've internalized and romanticized. And because archetypes live deep in the unconscious, these attractions often feel like fate. I feel like I've known you forever, they say, but in reality, they've known the image forever. You just happen to fit it. At first, these unconscious attractions feel like destiny, but they're also fragile, because they're not rooted in reality, they're rooted in imagination. The moment you reveal your complexity, your contradictions, your flaws, the projection begins to crack. You forget to reply to a message, you say something clumsy, you show emotion they weren't expecting, and suddenly, their dream figure behaves like a human. It can be devastating for both of you. They may say, "You've changed," but you haven't. You've just stepped out of the role they unconsciously cast you in. This is the painful truth. Jung understood, the end of projection often feels like the end of love, but it's also the beginning of something more honest, more conscious, more real, because now the question becomes, can they still love you, not as a symbol but as a whole human being. And can you see the same in them? Jung didn't believe projection was bad. In fact, he saw it as the first step in a powerful process, psychological alchemy. We are drawn to people who reflect our unfinished business, so that through relationship we can become whole. That's what romantic love offers, at its highest form, not completion but awakening. The people who fall for you are not just looking to love you, they are on some level trying to love themselves through you. And you're doing the same. You're not innocent in this dynamic. You project too. We all do. But when both people become aware, when both start to see beyond the fantasy, they can begin the real work, integrating the parts of themselves they projected outward. And that's where real intimacy begins. Not in perfection, but in truth. So why do people fall in love with you? Because you remind them of something they lost, or something they never dared to be. Because you reflect back to them a part of their soul still waiting to be claimed. And maybe, just maybe, your presence isn't just a comfort to them, it's a call, a mirror, a challenge, the kind that says, it's time to come home to yourself. There's a particular high that comes from feeling seen, not just noticed, but recognized, as if someone finally understands a language you've been whispering your whole life. When someone projects their ideal onto you, you can feel like a god, magnetic, desired in a way that transcends the physical. It's intoxicating, but it's also dangerous, because in that moment, they're not seeing your wounds, your fears, your humanity. They're seeing what they want to see. And if you've spent most of your life feeling invisible, this can feel like salvation. You may even start to play the role they've written for you, become the seducer, the savior, the muse, because the attention feels like love. But here's the problem. To be loved for your illusion is to be alone in your truth. If you only feel valued when you're firm in the fantasy, you start to fear being real. You shrink parts of yourself to stay lovable. You silence your truth to maintain the illusion. And the more loved you are for the projection, the more terrified you become of being discovered. This is why some people self-sabotage relationships that seem perfect. Deep down they know the love isn't real. It's not them being loved, it's the mask. Relationships often begin with unspoken contracts. You'll make me feel strong. You'll make me feel wanted. You'll make me feel safe. And in return, I'll be who you need me to be. These contracts are rarely verbalized. They're shaped in silence, in gestures, in energy, but they run deep. And when one person breaks the contract by evolving, by changing, by revealing their truth, the other feels betrayed. But here's the paradox. Love that depends on roles isn't love, it's codependency. Jung would argue that the purpose of relationship is not comfort, but transformation. The moment you meet someone who reflects your unconscious material, your soul stirs, not for pleasure, not for peace, but for integration. That's why the people who fall in love with you often experience emotional chaos. You didn't just make them feel, you stirred the contents of their unconscious, the ghosts of their childhood, the rage of their repression, the grief of unlived life. And yet, in that chaos, there's gold. Carl Jung believed that everything we reject about ourselves doesn't disappear. It gets buried in what he called the shadow. The shadow is the dark cellar of the psyche. It holds our jealousy, our fear, our lust, our insecurity, but also our power, our creativity, our intuition, our vitality. When someone falls in love with you, they may not realize they're also falling in love with their shadow, because you hold it, you wear it. If they were raised to suppress anger, they might be drawn to your intensity. If they denied their sensuality, they might crave your physicality. If they were taught to be small, they might idolize your boldness. They're not just admiring you, they're admiring the part of themselves they disowned. But here's the twist. When that same trait no longer serves their ego, when it becomes inconvenient, threatening, or too real, they may try to punish you for it. The same boldness they worshipped becomes too much. The same passion they adored becomes dramatic. The same depth they fell for becomes complicated. This is the shadow in action. First we crave it, then we condemn it, and unless we become conscious of this cycle, we will repeat it over and over with different people, different faces, but the same core wound. So how do we break free? How do we move beyond unconscious attraction and toward real lasting connection? Jung didn't offer easy answers. but he believed that the key was consciousness, to become aware of what we're projecting onto others and onto ourselves, to pause and ask, what am I really attracted to here? Is it them, or the role they play in my story? What part of myself am I seeking through this connection? This is where love becomes less about possession and more about presence. To love consciously is to see the other as a full person, not a savior, not a symbol, not a story, but a soul with their own complexity, wounds, desires, and needs. And when you're seen in that way fully, with your light and your shadow intact, it no longer feels like a high, it feels like home. Perhaps the most profound truth in all this is that you don't need to perform to be loved. You don't need to become someone's fantasy. You don't need to echo their wounds or amplify their dreams, because the right person, the conscious person, will not fall in love with their projection of you. They'll fall in love with you, the you that exists when you're not trying, the you that stumbles, contradicts, cries, laughs too loudly, and sometimes needs space, the you that is honest, whole, human. And that's why this work, this awareness is not just about relationships, it's about identity. It's about reclaiming yourself from all the roles you've played, just to be seen. Because once you stop being who the world wants you to be, you become who you were always meant to be. So when someone falls in love with you, maybe it's not because maybe it's because you've woken something sleeping inside them, a dream, a desire, a wound. And just maybe, by meeting you, they're not just meeting a partner, they're meeting themselves. The truth is, every relationship is a mirror, but not every mirror tells the truth. Your task is to become so grounded in your own truth that no reflection can distort it. And in that place, deep in your wholeness, you'll find not just love, but freedom. There comes a moment, sometimes quietly, sometimes violently, when the illusion breaks. You say something honest, you do something unexpected, you reveal a truth you've hidden, and suddenly, the glow in their eyes dims, the enchantment fades. It's not that you became less lovable, it's that you stopped being their fantasy. And this is when most relationships either end or begin. Because now, finally, both of you are naked. No projections, no masks, no scripts, just two souls, raw and real, facing each other in the bright, uncomfortable light of truth. It's in this moment that the work begins, not the romantic work of keeping someone's attention, but the spiritual work of building intimacy. Intimacy not built on illusion, but on recognition. Not I love what you give me, but I love what you reveal in me. Between letting go of the illusion and discovering real connection, there is often a desert, a space of emptiness, of quiet, of solitude. This is where many people rush back into another relationship, another projection, another drama, because the silence of self can feel unbearable. But this silence is sacred. In solitude, you begin to hear the whisper of your own truth. You discover who you are when no one needs you to be anything, when you're not being adored or desired or feared, just seen by yourself. And that is terrifying, because it confronts you with a question: if no one is watching, do I still matter? But it's also liberating, because it allows you to rebuild your identity, not as a reflection of someone else's fantasy, but as a declaration of your own essence. You become less about being wanted, and more about being whole. When you meet someone after doing this inner work, something shifts. You're no longer seduced by attention. You're no longer addicted to being chosen. You're no longer searching for someone to rescue you from yourself. Instead, you become curious. You ask, who is this person really? Not how do they make me feel, but what parts of themselves have they hidden, and are they ready to meet them? Love becomes less about validation and more about witnessing. You witness them, they witness you, and together you hold space, not for perfection, but for truth. This is not always easy. In fact, it's often uncomfortable, because the deeper the love, the more of your shadow it calls forth. But that's what makes it transformative. Real love doesn't complete you, it undoes you. It takes down the walls you built to protect yourself. It challenges your identity. It asks you to meet yourself again and again, at every new level of awareness. And in this way, love becomes not an escape from yourself, but a return to yourself. Every person who falls in love with you and leaves, every projection that ends in disillusionment, offers you a gift. Not the kind of gift that comes wrapped in beauty and ease, but the kind that hurts, the kind that lingers, the sacred wound, the heartbreak that opens the door to your deepest healing. When someone's love exposes your pain, they are not your enemy, they are your teacher. They show you where you are still fragmented, where you are still hungry for approval, where you still fear abandonment, where you still chase fantasies over reality. And the task is not to blame them, not to shame yourself, but to listen, to trace the wound back to its root, to hold it, to name it, to love it. Because only by healing the sacred wound can you love without needing to be worshipped, can you connect without needing to be saved. Eventually, you return to the world, but you are no longer seeking mirrors, you are no longer seduced by fantasy, you are no longer desperate to be seen in ways that require you to disappear. Now when someone loves you, you don't lose yourself, you remain rooted, aware, open, but discerning. You know when someone sees you, and when someone sees what they want to see, and you no longer betray your truth to fit the role, because you've come to a quiet realization: the person who sees you clearly will not need you to perform. They won't place you on a pedestal, they won't worship your potential. They will sit beside your reality, with reverence, with patience, with presence. This is the kind of love that grows slowly, like roots beneath the earth. It may not burn with immediate intensity, but it lasts. And more importantly, it frees you. So when someone falls in love with you, pause, breathe. Ask not just what they see in you, but what part of themselves is reaching out through that love. Ask what story they've placed you inside, and whether you were born to play that role. And then ask yourself, am I still loving them, or am I just loving who I become in their eyes? In the end, the most sacred love is not the one that completes you. It's the one that holds a mirror to your soul, and stays even when the reflection is no longer pretty. Because true intimacy begins when the projection ends. And in that stillness, when all the illusions dissolve, you don't just find someone else, you finally find yourself. From Plato's Symposium to Jung's theory of the anima and animus, humanity has always chased the myth of the other half, the soulmate, the divine counterpart, the missing piece. But this myth has a hidden truth. The other we long for is often a reflection of a part of ourselves we haven't yet claimed. When we fall in love, especially deeply and suddenly, it often isn't just chemistry or fate, it's archetypal recognition. A part of our unconscious mind sees something familiar, something profound, something buried. A man might fall in love with a woman who embodies his anima, his repressed emotional self. A woman might project her animus, her denied inner strength, onto a man. We think we're loving a person, but we're really loving a forgotten version of ourselves. And the tragedy? Once we retrieve that part, the projection fades, the spell breaks, and what's left is a human being, flawed, real, and not at all what our myth was built upon. Most of us resist this collapse. We try to sustain the fantasy. We cling to the story we told ourselves. This is the one. This is love. This is forever. But real love is not a fairy tale. It's not a savior narrative. It's not a constant state of being swept off your feet. It is a choice, made day after day, in the midst of discomfort, honesty and growth. The end of projection is not the end of love. It's the end of the illusion of control, the end of using someone else to regulate our emotional world. And in that collapse, something beautiful happens. You see them, not as a hero, not as a villain, not as your missing half, but as a soul, a fellow traveler, a mirror, a challenge. And you are finally free to love them, not for what they mean to you, but for who they are. Not for the role they play in your life story, but for the mystery of their own becoming. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become whole, you must marry your opposites, your light and your dark, your strength and your vulnerability, your desire for union and your need for solitude. This is the inner marriage, the mystical, psychological and symbolic union of the self with its. When you integrate the part of you that you've been projecting outward, whether it's nurturance, passion, confidence, or wisdom, you stop seeking it in others. You no longer fall in love to feel alive. You are already alive. You no longer chase the unavailable to feel worthy. You already are. You don't need someone else to reflect your divinity. You've seen it in yourself. And when two people who have undergone this inner marriage come together, their love is not a hunger. It's a sharing, not a search for completion, but a celebration of mutual wholeness. There's a secret no one tells you about becoming conscious in love. It can be lonely. When you stop projecting, many connections fall away. You see where you were pretending. You notice how often others still chase ghosts in each other's faces. You may find that fewer people can meet you where you are, without masks, without ego, without agenda. But in that solitude, you are reborn. You become less easily impressed but more deeply moved, less dependent on chemistry and more attuned to presence, less eager to possess and more committed to witness. This is the paradox of awakening. You lose the high of illusion, but gain the quiet joy of truth, and you begin to sense that love is not something to fall into, it is something to rise with. Many relationships are karmic. They repeat patterns, they trigger old wounds, they loop endlessly between ecstasy and devastation. They are not here to last, they are here to teach. But once you've learned the lesson, once you've healed the wound, you stop attracting the same drama in different clothes. You begin living from dharma, from alignment, purpose, truth. Now relationships aren't about filling a hole, they're about supporting each other's evolution.